We're traveling with my boyfriend, 29M, his brother and his partner. We went on a cruise and got extremely drunk. I have a good tolerance generally, but yesterday for the first time I blacked out. I don't remember how I got to my cabin and I woke up naked. Didn't think too much about it because I had to rush and leave the boat that had arrived at our destination. My boyfriend was sleeping in the twin bed next to me. We start driving down and at lunch we have a moment alone and he tells me he fucked me while I was unconscious. He came in me and didn't clean up afterwards. He starts laughing as if it was a really funny joke and I nervously giggle not knowing how to react. He says to me, "You like it, right?" At this point I'm realizing I feel disgusted and dirty. I had realized I was wet during the day and didn't understand why. When he sees that my reaction isn't positive he gets mad. He expects me to find it funny. When I ask for space he gets annoyed. For the rest of the day I'm holding back tears and he started to realize he fucked up. I'm still so hungover and the group situation means I'm putting up an act as if everything's okay. I don't know what to do. I feel stuck. I lost my credit card yesterday too. He has had sex with me before while I was sleeping. I have consented to this and also I can stop him if I want to if it happens. But this feels so different. I couldn't say no and I hate the fact that he came inside of me and didn't clean up. I feel like so disrespected, mostly too because of how he expects me to find it funny. The time difference with my home country means I can't talk to anybody. I'm at a loss on how to process this. Any advice is welcome. Thank you for reading. Edit, I just want to clear some things up. 1. I have an IUD so I'm not worried about that aspect. 2. When he initiates while I'm sleeping I always woke up and either continue or ask him to stop. 3. Besides being blacked out I was told I was found sleeping on the floor. They could not wake me up despite trying to. 4. My credit card appeared. It was in his jean pocket. I genuinely don't think he was hiding it from me, he simply forgot. I usually give him my valuables when we go out because he has better pockets. 5. I'm now at the grandmother's house. I feel safe. Haven't talked much yet. I will start looking for flights now with my card. Update 1. Firstly, I'd like to correct something that several people mentioned before. I was effectively passed out that night, confirmed by a third party, and him. I broke up with him. It was the final straw after what had been a deeply uncomfortable trip, not because of spending time with his family or the activities themselves, but because of him. Throughout the trip, his behavior made me feel increasingly uneasy. To give you a better sense of what happened, here's a breakdown of the incidents leading up to my decision, from the least to the most alarming. 1. Constant annoyance. He seemed to take genuine pleasure in irritating me. Despite my efforts to be a great guest, dressing nicely, engaging in conversations, making people laugh, and helping around the house, he would deliberately annoy me. For example, while I was talking about artists I admire, he kept interrupting me on purpose, throwing out wrong names just to get a reaction. I was sharing something meaningful, and he chose to mock it. Another time, during a crowded lunch, I was visibly anxious trying to seat his whole family. I told him I was feeling nervous, and he laughed, asking, "What, are you autistic?" 2. Drawing dicks on me. At a hotel with another couple, I was lying on the couch with my legs on him. He started drawing dicks on my calves with a ballpoint pen, despite me repeatedly asking him to stop. I felt humiliated in front of his friends, whom I had just met 2 days earlier. When I finally got up and left early, he seemed baffled that I was mad but later offered a half-hearted apology. 3. Flashing me in public. One night, after drinking with his brother, 27M, and his brother's girlfriend, 21F, he asked me to take a picture of him and his brother. When I aimed the camera, I realized he had pulled out his penis. Thankfully, the girlfriend didn't notice, but I was shocked and immediately distanced myself for the rest of the night. He just laughed it off with his brother, not taking me seriously, again. 4. Unconsented sex. The most disturbing incident happened when I passed out from drinking. The next day, during a road trip to his grandmother's house, he told me what had happened. His brother's girlfriend confirmed to me that she had tried to wake me up, shaking and yelling at me, but I was completely unresponsive. Despite knowing this, he decided to undress me and have sex with me while I was passed out. Instead of caring for me, changing my clothes, making sure I was safe, hydrated, and not at risk of choking, he violated my trust. He knows how meticulous I am about cleaning up after sex, and yet, in my most vulnerable state, he did the opposite of taking care of me. After he told me, I was catatonic for the rest of the drive. I felt trapped, with 8 hours more to go alone in that car. That night, I confronted him not only about the unconsented sex but about all the unresolved issues in our relationship, including him texting prostitutes, supposedly for a potential client. I had the brilliant idea of recording the conversation. This will serve as a constant reminder of how he isn't the man I thought him to be. The recording is an hour long. I made a transcript of it and processed it through an AI to get this summary. As stupid as it sounds, I used it to put into words what I couldn't quite express. The following summary doesn't even cover the entirety of all the awful things he said. Keep in mind we were dating for 2 years together and living together for 1. I am still shocked how you think you can know someone and actually have a completely different person. This is the summary of the recording. Feel free to skip it, it is quite long. 1. Sexual boundaries and consent violations. One of the most alarming aspects of the conversation is your revelation that your partner had sex with you while you were passed out drunk. You clearly expressed that you felt violated and used, as you were in no condition to give consent in that moment. You describe waking up to realize that he had left his semen inside you without cleaning you up, which made you feel disgusted and humiliated. Your quote, "You had sex with me while I was passed out drunk. I couldn't wake up, and you didn't even clean me up after you came inside me. I didn't realize until hours later, and it made me feel so dirty." In response, he offers a weak apology, trying to justify his actions by saying he thought he had your prior consent, but clearly didn't understand that consent must be ongoing and cannot be given when someone is incapacitated. His response, "I thought I had your consent because of what we talked about before, that I could do it when you were sleeping. Now I see you didn't like it, but in my mind, I thought it was okay." This statement shows a lack of understanding of consent and disregard for your autonomy. Even more concerning is that when you first brought it up, he laughed at the situation, showing a lack of empathy and a clear dismissal of the seriousness of the violation. 2. Humiliation and disrespectful actions. You mentioned several instances where your partner humiliated or disrespected you in public and private, such as drawing penises on your body without your consent and flashing you in front of others. These actions made you feel deeply embarrassed and devalued, especially when they occurred in front of his friends, whom you had just met. Your quote, "You drew penises on my body in front of your friends, and I felt humiliated. I barely knew Hesa people, and you made me feel exposed and embarrassed." Rather than understanding your discomfort, he minimizes the situation, framing it as a harmless joke and dismissing your reaction as an overreaction. His response, "I don't see why you're so upset. Drawing penises on you is just a sign of affection to me, it's not a big deal. I thought we were all friends, and you're being insecure." This response is highly problematic as it shows a lack of respect for your feelings and boundaries. By framing your discomfort as insecurity, he invalidates your experience and shifts the blame onto you. 3. Dismissive attitude towards your emotions. Throughout the conversation, he repeatedly dismisses your emotions, making you feel as though you are overreacting or that your feelings are not valid. This is a common tactic in emotional manipulation known as gaslighting, where the perpetrator makes the victim doubt their own perceptions and feelings. Your quote, "I've been asking you to stop doing these things that make me feel disrespected, but you keep ignoring my boundaries. It's exhausting to constantly ask for basic respect." His response, "I think you're getting too hung up on these small things. You're overreacting to things like the drawing and the flashing. It's not that serious." By telling you that you're overreacting, he is invalidating your very real and reasonable feelings of discomfort and disrespect. This behavior erodes your confidence in standing up for yourself and contributes to your emotional exhaustion. 4. Inconsistent apologies and lack of accountability. He apologizes several times throughout the conversation, but his apologies are often followed by excuses or justifications, which undermines their sincerity. Rather than taking full accountability for his actions, he frequently deflects or tries to rationalize his behavior, making it difficult for you to trust that he will change. Your quote, "It's not just one thing, it's been a series of events that they made me feel disrespected and like I'm just your F/CK toy. I don't feel like you're my best friend. I can't trust you when you keep crossing my boundaries." His response, "I'm sorry, but I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I've been messing up a lot, but these things aren't who I am. I think it's just a bad string of events. We can work it out together." By downplaying the significance of his actions, he is avoiding the responsibility of truly understanding and addressing your feelings. His apologies lack depth and reflection, leaving you feeling unheard and dismissed. 5. Failure to prioritize emotional intimacy. You express feeling like you're not part of a true partnership and that he doesn't prioritize emotional intimacy with you. You feel like you're being treated more like an accessory or an object than a partner, despite making significant efforts to maintain the relationship. Your quote, "I don't feel like we're a team anymore. I've been making so much effort to be a good partner, but it feels like I'm just here for your benefit, not as an equal." His response, "I love you, and I want to make this work, but I feel like maybe you've been wanting to break up for a while. I think you're being hard on me." Rather than acknowledging your feelings of emotional neglect, he shifts the focus to whether or not you've been considering a breakup, subtly guilt-tripping you and avoiding addressing the core issue of emotional intimacy. This lack of real engagement with your concerns shows that he is not fully committed to the emotional health of the relationship. 6. Gaslighting and emotional manipulation. There are several moments where he uses gaslighting to make you question your reactions, particularly when he tells you that you're being too sensitive or overreacting. This tactic undermines your trust in your own emotions and perceptions, causing you to doubt yourself. Your quote, "Every time I bring up how much these things hurt me, you act like I'm overreacting. Gee, it makes me feel like I'm crazy for wanting basic respect." His response, "I think you're still mad about the sex incident, and that's why you're holding on to this. I've apologized, and I've been trying to make it right, but you're not letting it go." By framing your sustained hurt as unreasonable or excessive, he is invalidating your pain and making it seem like the issue is with your inability to move on, rather than with his actions. 7. Emotional exhaustion and unequal effort. You repeatedly express how emotionally drained you are from constantly having to explain your feelings and ask for respect. You feel like you've been putting in significant effort to make the relationship work, but he hasn't been reciprocating that effort. Your quote, "I've been putting so much effort into being a good guest on this trip, trying to be nice, looking good, and being social, but I feel like it's all for nothing because you don't make me feel valued." His response, "I know you've been making a lot of effort, and I appreciate it, but I feel like maybe you're expecting too much from me." This response further highlights the imbalance in the relationship. Rather than recognizing the unequal emotional labor you're carrying, he subtly shifts the responsibility back onto you, implying that you are asking too much. "I wish I could upload the original audio without compromising privacy. It is so much worse than what's written above, but at least this gives you a gist of how insensitive he was being. Throughout the conversation I cry a lot, just begging him to treat me right, with respect. And he just doesn't get it. He shows no empathy, no understanding." Bonus interaction that didn't enter in the summary: he was proud he hadn't drawn dicks or flashed me again. He said it as proof that he was improving. I ended the conversation by clearly stating that I wanted to leave as soon as possible. We slept separately that night. The next morning, he apologized. I pretended to accept it, as I wasn't going to risk further harm. He seemed to believe I would stay a few more days, hoping to make things right, but I had already made up my mind. On the day I left, I secretly packed my bags and booked a hotel room. I had spoken to my best friend and therapist, who both urged me to leave as quickly as possible. They gave me the strength to act, as I had been in such a shutdown state that I didn't know if I could do it alone. The first person I told I was leaving was his grandmother, a woman I love and admire. She's the kindest, most joyful person, and I had planned to make up an excuse for leaving. After dinner I got her to sit down with me alone in a nonchalant way that wouldn't raise suspicions. Instead of lying, I broke down and told her the truth about the unconsensual sex. She held me as I cried for the first time since it happened, and she stayed with me, comforting me as I continued to sob. She told me what happened wasn't love and that she was pissed at her grandson. She even offered me money and a ride to the hotel, doing everything she could to support me when I needed it most. When the taxi arrived, my, now ex-boyfriend was confused, but I didn't care. Leaving the rest of his family was awkward, and I don't know how much they know. Despite everything, I felt an immense sense of relief as I drove away. This trip opened my eyes to the extent of the emotional and physical violations I had been enduring. What started as subtle disrespect and annoyance escalated into clear boundary crossing and violations of trust. I finally realized that I deserved better, respect, care, and love that was genuine. Walking away wasn't easy, but it was necessary for my well-being. With the support of those who truly care for me, I know I'll be able to heal and move forward from this chapter of my life. I am now safe at home and have not drunk for a whole week. During the past months I had become dependent on alcohol, and during the vacation it turned into full-out abuse. I have had enough and I feel so much better. That beer at 6 p.m. fools you into thinking it makes you feel better, and then it ends up in you being wasted. I do not miss being hungover every day. Slowly rebuilding my life and self-love, taking the time to process what happened with compassion, one day at a time. I started running, yoga and meditating. Very motivated to finish my degree and get a job I actually enjoy. I feel excited for the future. I am much more at peace. If you are curious of another issue we had in our relationship, this is a post I made about him a couple of months ago. Again, you can see how he clearly disrespects my boundaries despite me being abundantly clear I was not okay with his relationship with my sister. I want to thank the people that responded to my original post, when I found out I was completely alone on an 8-hour car ride and due to the time difference I couldn't call home. You made me realize that I was not crazy, that my feelings were okay. I am so grateful for everybody that read and took time out of your day to answer. Lastly, I have also seen an uptick in posts with situations similar like mine. Women feeling disrespected by people that trust in sexual manners. I want you to know it is not okay. Consent is explicit and ongoing. Your partner's priority should be to make you always feel comfortable. If they do something they know is out of line, they do not love you, they love having you around. I am having a hard time accepting what happened. I feel lost, lonely, and confused. I am trying to reconcile these two images of the man who used to be my best friend. This trip was supposed to be a reward for both of us after a really challenging time where he did an amazing job of supporting me. He supposedly started therapy after I left the trip, but later I cut contact with him. He has texted me 2 times since. Once saying that he wished he could delete what happened, and another time saying he hoped I was okay. I was hoping to get more support back home, but unfortunately the subject is so hard/uncomfortable to talk about that everybody wants to tiptoe around it. He is still traveling and I have no idea when and if he will return. Despite ending on such a positive note, I sometimes feel I try to convince myself that what he did isn't that bad and that he is willing to change. I am so baffled by how someone I knew for 2 years could do such a 180 on me. Some of my friends say he was like this because we were in his home country and not back in my home country where we used to live together. Any advice on how to move on is welcome. Now on to second story. Sister tried to hijack our grandfather's house for 5 years despite declining the offer, and I had to confront our father. Back in June, my grandfather passed away. My grandmother passed away 4 years ago. On the day that my grandfather passed, my father called me, 44F, and offered me his home as my husband, 35M, and I are looking to move to where my immediate family lives. My husband and I discussed it and we accepted the offer. A few days after, my sister, 42F, called and asked if she and her husband could live in the house until we arrived. We were looking to move in about a year and a half, because they wanted to be able to live rent-free and save up for a down payment on a house. Since the house would be sitting empty until we arrived, I said of course they could. Fast forward to a couple weeks ago, my son, 2M, and I flew out to Texas for my grandfather's memorial, and while I was there, my sister was moving things into the empty home and starting to get things situated. I was mentioning what I wanted to do with it when we eventually moved in, and my sister looked kind of annoyed. I didn't really talk more about it after that. At one point, my father asked if they needed a couple months past when we arrived to get things finalized and moved out, would we be okay with that? Again, I said I didn't mind. My husband and I owe WN a home, so we know the process can be lengthy and things can go sideways. Yesterday, my husband texted me and asked if everything was okay. I told him that while I was busy with work, all was fine. But why was he asking? He told me my sister started texting him. My sister said to him, this is verbatim, I was just curious if you've been brought up to speed about the house out here? Hoi Poi Pingfong knows that my grandparents and my dad offered it to us first and that we plan to live there for a while before we can save enough money to buy a place of our own. But while she was out here a couple of weeks ago, she really made it seem like she think you guys are moving right in. When my father offered the home to me, I was not made aware that the house was offered to her first. When my husband showed me the text, I called my dad and asked if that was true. He told me yes, but that my sister had softly declined. He said her words were, I don't think we want to do that. So, it was offered to me. My husband then tells her that it's fine because we're a good 18 months from moving anyway. My sister then throws this fabulous curveball, yeah, but we're thinking around 5 years. Once my husband told me that part, I became livid. She knew we planned to move in January 2026. She only asked to stay in the home until we arrived, and Dad asked for a couple additional months after arrival, just in case, and now, she's just decided that they're staying for 5 years? Admittedly, I blew up at my sister and told her that she's got some big ass balls if she thinks she can attempt to paint this to my husband like I'm taking what's rightfully hers away from her. Bottom line, you said no and we said yes, and now you've decided you want it after all and that you're just going to take it for however long you want. I then told her that I will no longer be talking to her about this and she will not text my husband about this again. She went silent and I called my dad to fill him in and her new 5-year plan, and that because the home is in his name, we can communicate about the home through him, as I was not talking directly to her about this anymore. So, Ida for being mad and blowing up on my sister about going back on the original arrangement? And honestly, I'd like to know if anyone thinks that a soft decline is enough to come back and say, we want it after all so we're going to take it? ETA 2, I spoke with my father this morning, who said he spoke with my sister. She denied saying it would be 5 years, but it would definitely be at least a couple years. I told my father we have it in a text message of her saying it would be 5 years. My husband sent the text conversation screenshot to my father after I relayed this to him. I made it clear that this is what she does and how she tries to twist things to her advantage. I also made it crystal clear that I feel that he needs to uphold that she declined when offered to her and we had said yes to the offer. I explained that in reality, if this was happening outside of a family arrangement, there's no way in hell anyone else would ever give her the house. Think rental agreement type of situation. I also made it clear that if he decided to let her do what she wanted instead of honoring the agreement she made with me, then we would never come to Texas for any reason. Dad was unhappy to hear that and didn't want this to tear the family apart. I told him that he needed to hold her accountable for her behavior. He said he understood and would be meeting with my sister and her husband in a week or so to discuss it in detail and may or may not need to call me to be involved in the discussion. So, that's it for right now. I won't have any further updates, I think, until that time. Thank you to everyone for your support and advice. I truly appreciate you all. To fill in some details, we wouldn't own it right away. Dad wants to make sure we'll be good at that location because Texas is big, me is rural and jobs aren't always nearby. If we decided to stay in the home, he would gift it to us. Before gifting, we'd be paying him rent and the amount of the property taxes only. I would be brokenhearted if Dad sided with my sister, but I don't believe it would be enough for a no-contact situation because my sister is very manipulative and I'm not there to defend myself against her bullshit. Her, however, I would 100% go no contact with. We'd go to Colorado instead. Smile update 1. The TLDR from my last post is that my grandfather passed, my father offered me his house, we said yes and set a date to move. My sister asked to stay in the house until we arrived, then decided to just tell us she and her husband were going to live there for 5 years because it was offered to her first, and despite saying no originally, she changed her mind. Here's the update. I spoke to my father yesterday afternoon. He decided to compromise and asked us to hold off on moving until January 2027. We had originally planned for January 2026, so my sister could have 2 years rather than just 1 year. While I am not happy with this decision, I'm not so stubborn as to dig my heels in. I'm always open to compromise. However, while my husband is okay with this decision, he won't be solidly behind it because he has asked my father for a written agreement between the three parties, us, my dad, and my sister and her husband. It must be notarized as well. No response from my dad yet about the agreement in writing. We're feeling like he will not agree to that, and that is where we will draw the line in the sand. If he declines this request, then not only will be going with our plan B, we will be going NC with my dad and sister and her husband. So, that's the update for now. Thank you to everyone who had a lot of support and kindness in my original post. All of it gave me a lot to think about. ETA, you up. Just like y'all thought. Dad said no to the written agreement. He said he's instead going to make some changes to his will that will settle the matter for good. That said, I asked for more info and said he will share with me, my two sisters, and our husbands once the changes are made. Honestly, yes, I think that's exactly what she would do. I plan to stick to my guns on this though. 100% otherwise, they can say goodbye to me, my husband, and our son forever. I'm absolutely done with being screwed over. If I had to put a label of favorite on anyone, I'd say it's my youngest sister, who is not involved in this at all. Lol.